Thank you, Ireland and Savannah. Let's hear it again for them. Well, good morning. We find ourselves in the middle of Advent, in this Advent season right now, and we've been talking about our theme of coming home. And as Karen mentioned, this is as much about coming home to ourselves, our true selves. And so that's why this morning I wanted to focus on awakening that inner light, that Christ light within. And in this Advent story, the Christmas story in the season of Advent, it's a perfect template for that awakening of the Christ light. And so we talked about Mary listening for the call and being willing to say yes in small ways and larger ways. And Karen talked about the wise men and our wise ancestors being that very presence and listening for the stillness. And now as we look at our shepherds, they represent that beingness in the dark, that keeping watch in the dark and listening for that inner voice and that stillness. And as we move into the winter solstice, this is a perfect time and a mirroring of the light and the dark, that contrast between light and dark. And so winter solstice is on Friday. It's the shortest day of the year. There's actually a full moon that's just past the solstice by a couple hours, and I haven't looked at the weather, but maybe we'll get lucky enough to see a full moon close to the winter solstice. And so we have this paradox of being in this season of darkness, but it's also known as the season of light. And it's perhaps because of this contrast that the lights are even more magical. I know I love walking through the city, and I don't know if you've been spending time in the neighborhood, but being able to see Denny Park with all of the lights, and it feels magical to me. And I've always loved that part about this season. I've often thought that it would be fun to go around and leave little thank you notes in my neighbors who put up Christmas lights. So I don't do it, but I greatly appreciate everybody does, and I love walking at night and just soaking in the lights. And for me, I love creating space of sacredness by candles and the candlelight at night, and just turning all the noise off and being in that stillness and that silence. Yet it's also the season of celebration, and so we're called out into all of these celebrations, and that can call forward the light as well. And so they're both important. These outer celebrations and the ways in which we call forth our light in these outer ways, as well as this inner experience in the inner light. There's probably more celebrations around light and festivities at this time than at any other time across cultures and traditions, with Hanukkah and Kwanzaa and Christmas and Diwali, and it's just so many traditions have this. And so I think there's this power that we can benefit from in the collective consciousness. We tend to feel more of that goodwill and more of that light shining through. And we have these outer reminders that awaken in us within. And I just want to share one that I had growing up. And so I've shared before that my mom was one of my closest spiritual buddies. We grew up in Unity, and so she was discovering the Unity teachings right as I was growing up. And we shared so much. We shared classes and books and stories, and we had many amazing talks about God and all things spiritual. And I have a lot of memories, but one that stands out in particular is when I was very small, I had this little tiny whiteboard, the dry erase boards, and it was on the wall above my bed, at the head of my bed. And my mom would write affirmations on that. And she'd sometimes doodle little pictures because she was incredibly creative. And I don't remember all the affirmations because I think truly they just integrated and they became inherent within me. But just think about what it's like to fall asleep at night over your bed having these affirmations and these positive statements. And there's one that stands out in particular, and that was, I am the light of the world. You are the light of the world. And that became such a foundational kind of touchstone for me through my life. And I always remember that. What a gift to have my mom, and truly both my parents and my sister as well, be this reflection of the light within me, and to call that out. And so we know that we cannot express that light if we do not have it within us. But sometimes those people and those relationships and those experiences in our life are the catalysts that allow it to shine forth. And so right now in this moment, when you think about what are those things that awaken that light within you, it may be people, it may be experiences, it may be nature. But just take a moment and reflect on what are those experiences and things that call forth that light in you. And just call out a couple if you think of any. Children? Couldn't hear you, Carl. Birds. Dancing. Music. Puppies. What was that? Yeah. Picnics, sunshine, right? There are so many things that light us up, that are that experience of joy. It's interesting that right now, when we touch on the Christmas story, there's actually not a Christmas story in the book of Mark and the Gospel of John. And I don't know if anyone's actually gone through and actually looked at that, but our Christmas story is actually a combination of the Christmas story from Matthew and Luke. But there's a different kind of story of awakening and birth in the Gospel of John. And that's a birth and a coming into being of the Christ light, the Christ consciousness. And so in John 1, 4 through 5, we hear, "What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it." And so again, what has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. And it's a reminder to remember that light that is being talked about is that light that is the truth of our being, our true selves. And so when we're talking about coming home, we're talking about coming home to that true light, that Christ light within us. And someone called out earlier, something that lights them up is puppies. Well, many of you know that I have a new puppy in my life right now. And I know not everybody loves dogs and puppies. So I just, I do know that and I want to acknowledge that. But a lot of people do. And so it's been, I've had puppies, but it's been a long time. And so I kind of knew what I was getting into, but there's been a lot of surprises as well. And so I knew there'd be some sleepless nights. I knew there'd be a lot of playfulness and fun. I knew there'd be some mischief. So this morning, as I was trying to get out the door, I had to consider whether I had to bring another dress, because suddenly my wonderful puppy Toby decided that my dress was a new plaything, and he started to sink his teeth into my dress, and I was like, oh my gosh, what if he grabs hold of it and he rips it, and then I will have nothing to wear to this morning. And so there's all these unexpected things, and one of the best surprises, I think, has been the way in which he lights up other people. And I hadn't really considered that. Karen and I were walking around the neighborhood last week, and every 10 feet, people go, oh my gosh, a puppy, can I stop and pet the puppy? Oh my gosh, a puppy. And there's just this gushing and effusion of happiness and joy and light. And Karen's like, oh my gosh, you can't actually get a walk in. I said, no, but isn't it great? And so one of my favorite monikers right now is Toby's this ambassador of joy and light. And that's how I see him. He lights people up. And again, that couldn't happen unless people had that light within them. And so all he is a catalyst to help awaken that and mirror that back to other people. And it's a joy and a gift to be able to experience that and see that happen for the people around me. So in addition to those outer experiences that we have that awaken that light and are those catalysts for light, we also have our inner practices, our inner experiences, our spiritual practices. And I want to share a story with you about a woman. Her name is Sunny Jacobs. And she was wrongly convicted in 1976 of the murder of 2 Florida police officers. She and her partner were both convicted. And so she was on death row for 5 years, and then her sentence was commuted to a life sentence, and she spent a total of 17 years in prison. Again, wrongly convicted of the crime until she was finally released 17 years later. And when she entered prison, she was a young mother. She had 2 young children, she was a daughter, she had a partner. She had this life that was really just taken away from her completely. And so it would be very easy to sink into a place of real despair and hopelessness. I think we can all imagine how hard that would be, especially knowing the circumstances and knowing that you were innocent, and here you were on death row. And she was in a tiny cell 6 feet by 9 feet. And on death row, at that time at least, they had her in isolation. And so she had barely any human contact. And so what she did instead of turning and spiraling into despair and hopelessness is she began to pray and meditate and practice yoga. And she shares that in that experience, she found more freedom than she'd ever known before. And of course, she wouldn't have wished this experience for herself or anyone else. But what she got out of it was something powerful. And she was able, in the darkest of circumstances and conditions, in her outer circumstances, to awaken this inner light that didn't have anything to do with what was going on around her, because it was solely contained within her own soul. And I just want to share something that she wrote in her book, Stolen Time. She said, "Hopelessness just didn't appeal to me. They can keep me here, but what goes on within the confines of these walls is mine to create. They cannot imprison my soul. Everyone gets challenged in life, and you can either spend the rest of your life looking backwards, or you can make a decision to keep going. That's the choice I made." And many of us don't have those kinds of challenges, but we all have those moments of challenge in our life. We all have those times of darkness. And as Karen was mentioning last week, when we have those experiences of light and joy and aliveness, let us step fully into those and be fully grateful and appreciative. But we're also called to be willing to be with the dark moments too. And so as we're coming into the winter solstice, there is this beckoning to spend some time in the darkness and to go within to the silence. And it's in that inner silence that we're able to nurture that light within us. And so it may seem counterintuitive, and we have often this resistance to go into the dark, to go into the silence and the quiet. We say we have these messages of our minds are too busy. Yet even for a moment, the more we can do that, the more we actually nurture that inner light within us. And the more we bring that forth to shine in all that we do in our lives. And so my invitation for you in this week, when I know many of our lives are very full and busy, is to carve out some space and time for that silence and the stillness, to be in the light of the darkness, which is a bit of a paradox, but that's what it is. Because it's in that darkness and that silence that our light is revealed to us. And so I'd like us to just plant a seed for this intention in the coming week. And I know a practice for me, sometimes I can't fit in that 30 or 40-minute meditation, but a practice I've been enjoying is to pause between activities and transitions. So throughout my day, between meetings, from one task to the next task, between places I'm going to, when I get to that next task or that next place or that next meeting, is just to take a moment and pause. And it can be as short as 30 seconds or a minute, and just breathe and recenter. And so right now in this moment, I'm just going to invite us to practice in that and plant the seed of intention of creating space for the silence this week. And so again, just taking a breath in, being present with all that is. Being willing to listen in the darkness, in the silence. And we set this intention for our week to be willing to pause. And in that pause, be willing to nurture our inner light, nourish our soul and our being. So in closing, I want to share a poem with you. It's by Janet Rupp and Macrina Whitaker. It's called Winter's Cloak. And I'll actually read it twice. This year, I do not want the dark to leave me. I need its wrap of silent stillness, its cloak of long-lasting embrace. Too much light has pulled me away from the chamber of gestation. Let the dawns come late. Let the sunsets arrive early. Let the evenings extend themselves while I lean into the abyss of my being. Let me lie in the cave of my soul, for too much light blinds me, steals the source of revelation. Let me seek solace in the empty places of winter's passage, those vast, dark nights that never fail to shelter me. And again, this year I do not want the dark to leave me. I need its wrap of silent stillness, its cloak of long-lasting embrace. Too much light has pulled me away from the chamber of gestation. Let the dawns come late. Let the sunsets arrive early. Let the evenings extend themselves while I lean into the abyss of my being. Let me lie in the cave of my soul, for too much light blinds me, steals the source of revelation. Let me seek solace in the empty places of winter's passage, those vast, dark nights that never fail to shelter me. Amen. And so my prayer for you in this Advent season is to know that you are the light of the world. I am the light of the world. We are the light of the world. And to be that reflection of the light to every single person you pass. May you be that catalyst that awakens that light in others and reminds them of their own light, so that each one of us can go forth and be that light in the darkness. Blessings.